sick 2000s brutal death metal freaks Lust of Decay finally decided to dust off their gore and entrail-soaked recording equipment and release their latest depraved offering in 19 years. I hope you're having a good evening at home. I'm, of course, the Drapery Falls, and I'm here to give my thoughts on their album Entombed in Sewage. Now, an almost 2-decade hiatus from the studio might lead you to be skeptical. So much can happen in that time, you change and grow as people. But rest assured, Lust of Decay are here to prove that they're the same twisted, goraholic bastards and solid musicians we've always known them as. It sounds about as filthy as the album art looks. If you have a morbid craving for catchy, brutal death metal with absolutely fat riffs, a heaping helping of groove, slams, all performed with the energy of punk and grindcore, with just a dash of melody on top, you've come to the right place, and you should stay tuned to see the rest of this review. As usual, I do not have a camera, so enjoy watching me play Borderlands 4. So yes, as I just mentioned, this is Lust of Decay's first album in 19 years. The last piece of music they put out was Purity Through Dismemberment in January of 2006, about 2 weeks before yours truly, The Drapery Falls, was even born. This came out on Comatose Music, an incredible label for all things brutal. Founding member and guitarist Steve Green actually founded this label and currently owns it. Massive respect deserved. This band hasn't even been active in years. They've played a few shows between 2014 and 2016, and it's been radio silence until 2020. I got into this band with their 2002 album, Fasting the Exhumed, which is a great example of a lot of the tropes that I love about early 2000s brutal death metal. Much like the two albums that came after it, the artwork is offensively horrible, in a way that I actually love. I think it's really funny how so many of the brutal death metal and grindcore bands at the time just could not afford a decent artist. You either got the PS1 extremely polygonal 3D art, or you have 2D digital art that looks like a bad point-and-click horror game you'd find on Newgrounds. The colors usually didn't make a ton of sense. Some things are heavily airbrushed and blurry, some things are just solid colors and lines. Pretty sure they used the burn tool to make these wounds. The skeleton is melted slightly and has a T-Rex arm, and I think those random white lines are supposed to be grass, but I can't tell. It looks like you found these albums covered in cobwebs in your weird uncle's basement. It adds a sort of DIY charm to these albums. They're not trying to pretend to be a super professional band. They're just a group of blokes from North Carolina that want to make downright filthy, raw, extreme death metal. No frills, and the cover art absolutely conveys that. This band is like a mix of Putrid and Lividity, and should also appeal to fans of Dying Fetus, Insidious Decrepisy, Corpse Fucking Art, I would say Early Aborted, and Pyaemia. It's groovy, but it's not really slow-paced overall. It's pretty high energy, and it's semi-technical, but in my opinion most of the technicality comes from the drums rather than the guitars. I know I've been focusing on the drums a lot in my past few reviews, but I have to talk about them when you bring up this band. Jordan Varela is an elite drummer. I haven't heard their 04 and 06 albums, I plan on doing it soon, but on Infesting the Exhumed, the drums throughout the entire album are extremely tight, snappy, and satisfying to listen to. And thankfully he's on this newest album and I instantly recognize his style. He sounds just as good, if not better, than on Infesting the Exhumed. I'll talk about his drumming more soon. I refreshed myself on that album, and while it is arguably a bit front-loaded, it was still very solid and entertaining the whole way through. And there were songs like Festering Anal Vomit and Head in a Crockpot that were as catchy as a Cannibal Corpse song. They had infectious choruses and even some poppy song structures, and that ethos carries over to this album. Despite this being unmistakably brutal death metal, there is no shortage of hooks in every song. The grooves are very fluid, they get into your soul and they make you want to move, even if it's just bobbing your head. I'm definitely hearing some more Devourment influence. I'm not saying they haven't evolved as a band, they've made some subtle tweaks to their sound here and there, but Entombed in Sewage sounds just like a Lust of Decay album. I mean, duh, right? It's the same band. But there are some bands that sound completely unrecognizable from how they did much less than 19 years ago. The characteristics of their sound that are intrinsic to them haven't left. Change can be good, but there's no need to fix what isn't broken. It's pretty clear why this album sounds so consistent, and that's because 3 out of 4 current members were there to write and record all 3 of their previous albums. This is always a green flag. It's good for bands to have members that they can consistently play with, and spend a lot of time as a band both live and in the studio. It shows good chemistry. Some bands are a rotating door of new faces, and they don't get a chance to settle in or get a feel for their style before they're gone. They have to spend hours upon hours relearning and reteaching these songs, just for them to leave or be kicked out a few years later. Then you have the whole Bands of Theseus, where every original member decided to bounce, and yet they refuse to just change the name. The core features of what made their sound unique gets lost in translation. Let's talk about some of these people, shall we? I figured I should start with my favorite member, Jordan the Violator Varela, the beast of a drummer. And yes, that is his nickname. His style is extremely tight and nimble. He's also a very dynamic drummer. He's constantly changing up his drum grooves, adding lots of unique accents and fills, and his cymbal work is always incredible. With the kind of riffs that this band plays, it's easy to imagine stiffer, boxier drum beats fitting them that 1,000 other drummers would go for. But that's never the case with this band. His grooves are much more smooth and fluid. You could definitely call them flashy or say that he outperforms the other members, but I would say that the drums are a big part of what gives this band their character. It holds down everything that they're playing. If you decide to listen to this band, you're gonna be focusing on the drums. Varela has an extensive resume. Unsurprisingly, he was on one of Lividity's albums. He's been in a multitude of death metal bands based out of North Carolina, and I didn't realize there was that big of a scene there. Bands like Cesspool of Vermin, Domination Through Purity, and Debodified. He formed a one-man project in the late 2000s called Symphony and Acrimony, and he's currently doing one-man black and death metal project in Concord. I also wanted to mention that he's in Shuriken Cadaveric Entwinement, which is a death metal band that talks about samurai. I should probably be listening to that right now. Steve Green, the founder of Comatose Music, has been playing guitar since the beginning on all their material. While his playing is often technical, it's rooted in a more straightforward, grindy sort of style. The grooves and slams offer some contrast, being much more simplistic. They're very focused on doing exactly what they need to do, and every note serves its purpose. I would say it's harder to write great riffs when you're working with fewer notes. It's also probably so you're more bedazzled by the drum wizardry going on. Vocalist Jay Barnes and other guitarist Ryan Coulter are both members of Cesspool of Vermin and the Funny Samurai Band. Jay on Infesting the Exhumed had a deep John Gallagher-esque style. And on their new album, it's still just as guttural, but it's much more mid-range. It reminds me the most of Jason Keyser, originally from a very similar and very good brutal death metal band Mucopus. Skinless, who every death metal fan should know, and currently Origin, who I've mentioned before. I'm obsessed with them. They're like if Cocaine was a band. He also does some higher-pitched snarling vocals that remind me a bit of Sean Beasley of Dying Fetus. Ryan is their only member that is somewhat new. He started touring with them in 2014, and fully joined when they decided to reform in 2020. He's in a band called Beerivore, which have horrendously bad album covers. One of them is drawn with crayons, and he's in Coat Hanger Abortion. I know I was just talking about the guitars, but I was noticing some slight differences in the guitar writing on this album that I think is an improvement from their debut. This is not the type of band who likes to do a lot of leads, or almost any at all, but I was picking up on a lot more melody baked into the riffs themselves. It gives the riffs a sense of purpose and makes them feel more like the driving force of the song. These songs don't seem like an unfocused collection of ideas, because that forward melody ties it all together. It reminds me a lot of Cannibal Corpse in that way. Now, I don't want to talk too long about the production on this album because I've already been going on for a while. The guitars have an interesting tone. They're pretty compressed, and they're just barely scooped enough to where they sound very heavy but still maintain a lot of mid-range. They have a nice crunch and a decent amount of gain, which gives the chugs a good sizzle. I wouldn't describe it as muddy at all. It's actually very clear and retains a lot of detail. It can get a bit fatiguing on your ears after a while, but that's kind of the nature of brutal death metal. The snare isn't a typical hollow or pingy snare, it's just a solid thud. What does sound hollow is the toms. They sound like a big block of wood, or one of those toy drums you get as a kid. It's kind of like a lower range snare. It's the most out of the ordinary part of the drum mix, but I'm not complaining, it sounds good. The kick has a kind of popping, clicking sound. All the cymbals sound great. The bell, the china, it's all very crisp and clear, and it doesn't sit too high in the mix to where it gets annoying while still being very prominent. This lets you hear all the incredible, intricate cymbal patterns throughout the album. The bass complements the mid-range guitars and adds a nice thumping sound. It's a good anchor for the whole mix. Overall, while it's not the ideal brutal death metal mix, it fits the music, and everything is well separated and well balanced. The first song, Parasitic Exsanguination, pulled me in within the first minute. I pretty much knew right away that this album was going to be sick. I love how the intro riff is basically starting with slow chugs and getting faster and higher on the neck. The grindy nature of the fast sections combined with the vocals make it sound a lot like a slower Origin song. There's a really nasty slam with some cool pinch harmonics and very satisfying cymbal work. And they do that thing where they bring the riff back slower and heavier a few times, but it's really just them switching up the drum beat that gives it a lot more heft. The guitars themselves aren't that much different. The back half of the song gets decidedly thrashy with a very hooky riff that made me think of Violence Unimagined, and I like how it ends pretty much the same way it starts, with the high and low vocals going on at the same time. Hallucinations of the Decrepit has some very Terrence Hobbs-esque riffing, also comparable to Pyaemia, but the main vibe in here is Suffocation, and it's mixed in with these chunky stop and start Dying Fetus grooves. There's a really cool gang vocal call-out part at around 90 seconds in, as they're transitioning back to the Suffocation part. The drums are very precise and technical, and constantly shifting the flow of the song around. There's a massive slow slam in this song, and the drums in that part reminded me of Lily Gruber. I also like the semi-melodic phrasing during this part. Nourishing the Swine I instantly really got into because there's a part of this song right in the middle that totally sounds like my favorite part of Baby Killer by Devourment. They 100% were influenced by that song. It might be an homage to it. The part where they go into this super catchy swinging groove with some stomping chugs, it's really fun to listen to. The riff is just different enough, but the drum beat is like a much more elevated version of the one from Baby Killer, with more intricate fills and accents. And I remember listening to that song at first and thinking that my only complaint would be if they don't repeat that section. And thankfully they bring it right back at the end. Love that. And the rest of the song is just as catchy. Some of the riffs remind me of the heavier Hypocrisy songs, mixed with Origin and Deeds of Flesh. There's a lot of big galloping parts. There's a particular guitar tag that's very satisfying to listen to. Fetal Contamination Process is the slowest and chuggiest song on the album. It's just a big slab of dying fetus and environment worship. It brings back that kind of swing from the previous song, and the riffs have kind of an unpredictable staccato feel. But they also decide to harmonize a lot of the riffs, which offers a cool contrast. I also really like the fast parts of the song. They're very reminiscent of Mark of the Legion by Deeds of Flesh. I like how they mix the sharp, speedy tremolos with slow chugs, where you can hear the squeak of the strings. Track 5 is Rusty Razor Rim Job. Ow! Jeez, man. Classic Lust of Decay song title. It opens with slow, semi-dissonant riffs that are like a slammier version of something like Nothing Is Not by Morbid Angel. Again, very catchy guitar tags. A lot of this song is very Suffocation-y. One moment that stood out to me a lot was the last third of the song, where they drop everything out and have several vocal tracks bellowing out the song title right before the biggest slam part comes in, and the drums just start going mental. Order 66, I actually had to look this up, but it is a Star Wars reference. Vocals in brutal death metal are usually just there to add texture and make the music sound more nasty. But the vocal patterns in this song are extremely catchy. If I were to give one critique about this song, it's that it relies a bit too much on fast to mid-paced chugs, but there's still lots of interesting tags and guitar phrasing in between it. It ends with a guitar mimicking the Star Wars theme, and a sample of what sounds like Darth Vader breathing. I thought that was a cool touch. Desiccate the Epithelium has some sharp sounding stop and start fast sections, and a really bouncy slam that I would expect out of a band like Visceral Disgorge. The main riff of the song is a bit thrashier than usual. I don't have a lot to say other than it's another solid collection of great riffs and, as usual, amazing drumming. The title track is one of my favorites. It's very high energy. It starts with one of the fastest and most technical, blistering parts of the entire album. I love how they fade into it. It's a lot like something you would hear on Consume the Forsaken. They slam on the brakes, pun maybe intended, and go straight into a downright mean, vicious sounding chug pattern. I love the multi-track vocals. All throughout, they maintain a great balance of groove and technicality. This song will punish you. They chose this song in particular to include basically the only proper leads in the entire album. Halfway through, there's a somewhat low, ominous crawling melody that sounds like something Deceased or Autopsy would use. There is another one that pops up after that's also very Autopsy-esque, and it transitions well into the main riff. Even more catchy, layered, chanted vocals pop up towards the very end, and the riff they decide to end on is one of my favorites on the album. Overall, I really enjoyed this album. It was very solid all around. I'm really glad this band is back and they're staying true to their classic sound while also not just rehashing the same stuff over and over again. I think this was a more impressive comeback than the new Pyrexia albums, and those were killer as well. My complaints with this album were few and far between. It was well written and well executed. There were several standout songs and plenty of hooks. The first 3 songs in the title track are all playlist material for sure. This should appeal to really all fans of brutal death metal. Even if you're just a fan of Cannibal Corpse, Suffocation, Dying Fetus, I would also say 200 Stab Wounds. I'm feeling an 8.5 out of 10 for Entombed and Sewage. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe for more reviews, rankings, lists, and more types of videos coming soon. Also ring the bell to get notified whenever I upload. Did you like this album? What was your favorite song from it? Let me know in the comments. If there's a band you want me to cover in a video, make sure to comment that as well. I will catch you guys in the next video. For now, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and bye.